One of the saddest true stories of real people in history. The life of Joanna of Castile, Joanna de Meade. History is about real people. For many people, the notion of studying our history presents a rather dull prospect of learning to recite dates and names, such as 1066 or 1776 or 1939 to 1945. But in order to develop a true passion for this most absorbing, and in my opinion anyway, most necessary of the branches of learning, it is always important to remember that we're dealing in the stories of real people. Even the most famous personages from our past were never that much different from ourselves. They had toothaches and colds. They suffered from phobias and fears like any other person. If somebody sneaked up behind George Washington and burst a balloon with a large bang, he would be just as likely to almost jump out of his skin as any mere mortal. The most powerful individuals ever lived could still suffer the pangs of unrequited love, or the frustrations of not being able to pacify an unruly child. In short, none of them, in a real sense, were that different from the rest of us. That is what I find to be one of the greatest fascinations of history, and it is what will bring me back to study it again and again. When the memory of the exact date of the Battle of Waterloo has faded from my memory, I will still remember that Napoleon, in making love to Josephine, was so violent in his exertions as to sometimes break the bed, or that Julius Caesar had a comb-over, and his legions used to refer to him as Old Baldy. It is with the intention of reminding my viewers that history is not just a recitation of dusty facts, but a telescope that can carry our gaze into the life stories of some fascinating and very real people, that I am now going to relate the tragic story of one rather sad but all too human and real person from the historical parade. Joanna de Meade, a sad but all too real person from history. Joanna, or Juana in Spanish, was the daughter of Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon. She was the sister of Catherine of Aragon, first wife of Henry VIII of England, and the mother of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. In October 1496, she was married to Philip the Handsome, Duke of Burgundy. Philip was well called by that name. He was very good-looking, with a very high sex drive. Indeed, he had the wedding rush through in order to get to bed with his beautiful young bride the sooner. Joanna fell madly in love with her handsome husband. The marriage was not a great success, though, as Philip liked to share his favours around a large selection of ladies besides his wife. He also had the unfortunate habit of continuously trying to interfere in her affairs and usurp her rights as Princess of Castile. He really wasn't a very nice man. Nevertheless, the sex must have been very good, because she did manage to have 6 children. The deaths of several of her relatives meant that Joanna became the heiress to the Spanish kingdoms and the actual Queen of Castile. This did not sit too well with her father, Ferdinand II of Aragon, a slippery fish if ever there was one. He wanted the rulership of Spain entirely for himself. Philip also wanted to rule Castile in his own right and exclude his wife. Philip and Joanna journeyed to Spain to take over her kingdom, regardless of what Ferdinand might think. But at a meeting at Villa Fafila in 1506 between Ferdinand and Philip, the King of Aragon signed a treaty relinquishing his claims on his daughter's kingdom. The two sneaky men then signed a second treaty in which Ferdinand agreed that Philip should have rule of Castile, because they said that Joanna was mad and incapable of ruling. What a father, and what a husband. Joanna, to tell the truth, had been showing some signs of instability. She had once spent 36 hours outside of the castle, in the depths of winter, refusing to come in. She may have been suffering from bipolar disorder or some form of depression, but you can be certain that the activities of the two men that should have been the most supportive people in her life did not in any way help. To make matters even worse, the ever-treacherous Ferdinand that same afternoon repudiated his agreement with Philip, saying that nothing should ever interfere with his daughter's rights as Queen of Castile, while retaining his right to intervene if he considered affairs in that kingdom were not going satisfactorily. He then buggered off back to Aragon, leaving Philip in effective control of Castile. This is where the rather sad bit really starts. In September 1506, Philip the Handsome died of typhus at the age of 26. Joanna was stricken with great grief. They say that love is blind. I think they are correct. She is said to have been so overcome that she set out on a really long journey to bury her husband. She is supposed to have had his coffin opened every night so she could sit beside it talking to him. Needless to say, she was unable to manage her kingdom properly. Things went from bad to worse, and plague and famine started to spread throughout the land. This gave her predatory father the very excuse that he needed. He returned to Castile in July 1507. As luck would have it, the plague and the famine abated around the time that he arrived, thus giving him the opportunity of pretending that he, the great Ferdinand, had restored the kingdom. Ferdinand and Joanna met up at Hornellus in Castile on the 30th of July 1507. He more or less bullied her into giving up control of her kingdom. He then had her confined in a convent with a very small retinue of servants that were handpicked by him. The rumour spread abroad that she brought her husband's body to the convent to keep him close. We don't know whether that was true or not. It may have just been started by a father to help justify her deposition from the throne. How sad that this real person from history had to deal with real heels from history. Joanna spent the rest of her life incarcerated in the convent. Her son, Charles V, treated her no better than either her father or her husband had. It suited his purposes to keep his mother confined, and that is exactly what he did. Eventually, she did in fact start to go really mad. She began to believe that the nuns were trying to poison her. She died in 1555. The story of Joanna is a very sad one, but I feel it has more to do with the travails of a woman who was surrounded by predatory men all her life. Men who could not deal with the notion that women had a right to conduct their own affairs. The mental illness was only incidental. She should be renamed Joanna the Constantly Betrayed. So, I'm saying to you now that the next time you get the notion that all history is just a collection of musty tales that modern people ought not to bother their heads with, remember the real and true story of Joanna. Her life would be considered too far-fetched for even the most imagination-driven of soap operas. If that doesn't enthuse you, think of the image of Napoleon having sex.